In the shadowy alleys and smoky pubs of London's East End during the 1950s and 1960s, two names carried an aura of both fear and fascination: Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Better known as the Kray twins, they were the embodiment of ruthless charm and calculated violence. Rising from a tough working-class background, they became the most notorious gangsters Britain had ever seen. Their empire was built not just on fists and brutality, but on influence, manipulation, and a reputation so intimidating that few dared to cross them. For nearly 2 decades, the Krays controlled the streets of London, and their story became etched into British crime history as one of power, corruption, and downfall. The twins were born in Hoxton, East London, in 1933. Raised in poverty during the bleak years of the Great Depression and the Second World War, they grew up in an environment where toughness was survival. From an early age, Ronnie and Reggie learned to use their fists, protecting one another in countless street fights. Their reputation as fearless and unbreakable boys spread quickly, making them leaders among local youths. Even as teenagers, they were drawn to the thrill of crime. Armed robberies, extortion, and protection rackets became their stepping stones into the underworld. But what set them apart from other petty criminals was their charisma and ability to command loyalty. By the late 1950s, the Kray twins had moved beyond street brawls. They founded The Firm, their criminal organization that would dominate London's underworld. Unlike many gangsters who operated in the shadows, the Krays positioned themselves as both feared criminals and glamorous celebrities. They bought nightclubs, gambling dens, and pubs, where London's elite, politicians, movie stars, musicians, mingled freely with hardened criminals. The twins understood image. They dressed in sharp suits, spoke with confidence, and charmed the media. Reggie, the more controlled and business-minded brother, often acted as the public face, while Ronnie, unpredictable and prone to violence, made sure their reputation remained terrifying. Their empire extended far beyond entertainment venues. The Krays were masters of intimidation and extortion. Local businesses paid for protection to avoid destruction. Rival gangs were crushed or absorbed into the firm, and those who resisted faced brutal consequences. Ronnie, in particular, was notorious for his volatile temper. Stories circulated of him pulling out pistols in crowded bars or using glass bottles in sudden explosive attacks. These tales, whether exaggerated or not, fueled the mythology of the Krays as untouchable kings of the East End. But what made the twins truly unique was their crossover into high society. In an era when class divisions in Britain were rigid, the Krays blurred the lines. They mingled with celebrities like Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. They entertained members of parliament and aristocrats in their clubs. Newspapers began to portray them not only as criminals, but as celebrities themselves. For many in the working-class East End, the Krays were local heroes, men who had risen from poverty to power and who gave back to their communities. They were seen handing out gifts, helping neighbors, and standing up to corrupt businessmen. This Robin Hood-like image made them folk legends, even as their criminal empire grew bloodier. Behind the glamour, however, was a reign of terror. Ronnie's mental instability and violent outbursts made him particularly feared. In 1966, he brazenly murdered rival gangster George Cornell in the Blind Beggar pub in Whitechapel, shooting him in front of witnesses. Cornell had allegedly insulted Ronnie by calling him a fat poof, and Ronnie made sure no one would forget the cost of such disrespect. Just a year later, Reggie brutally stabbed Jack the Hat McVitie, a former associate who had fallen out with the firm. These killings marked a turning point. They demonstrated that the Krays were not just businessmen in sharp suits, but ruthless killers willing to eliminate anyone in their way. The murders brought unwanted attention. Scotland Yard, which had long struggled to bring down the Krays due to their powerful network of informants and fear-stricken witnesses, now had undeniable evidence. Detectives began closing in, determined. For weeks, newspapers splashed their faces across front pages. Witnesses were placed under police protection as they testified about the Krays' brutal crimes. The glamour, charm, and celebrity connections that had once shielded them now collapsed under the weight of cold, hard evidence. In 1969, both Ronnie and Reggie were sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years, a punishment so severe it ensured they would never return to the world they once ruled. Life behind bars was very different from the opulence of their East End empire. Ronnie's mental health deteriorated further, and he was eventually transferred to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital, where he remained until his death in 1995. Reggie, more disciplined but still haunted by his violent past, spent over 3 decades in prison before being released on compassionate grounds in 2000. He died shortly after, from cancer, closing the final chapter of the Kray twins saga. The Kray twins were not just feared because of their brutality, they were feared because of their unpredictability. One moment, they could be laughing and joking with someone, treating them like family, and the next they could turn violent without warning. This unpredictability created an atmosphere of constant fear in London's East End. People knew that one wrong word or even a look could spark the twins' rage. Their reputation alone was enough to silence witnesses, intimidate rivals, and keep the law at bay. In many ways, their psychological hold over the community was just as powerful as their physical violence. Another fascinating aspect of their reign was how deeply they became entangled with politics and high society. There were rumors of members of parliament, celebrities, and even members of the aristocracy attending the Kray's exclusive clubs. These connections gave the twins a layer of protection, as many influential figures preferred to stay quiet rather than risk exposure of their own dealings. The Krays exploited this web of connections, which blurred the line between crime and respectability in London. This made them far more dangerous than ordinary gangsters, as they were shielded by some of the most powerful individuals in the country. However, cracks eventually began to form in the Krays empire. Their escalating violence, particularly the murders of George Cornell and Jack McVitie, drew increasing attention from Scotland Yard. The killings were so brazen that the police could no longer ignore them, and public outcry against the twins grew louder. At first, many were too afraid to testify, but eventually the law began to close in as more people realized that the Krays' grip on London could not last forever. The very arrogance and notoriety that had made the Krays legends also made them easier to target. When the twins were finally arrested and put on trial in 1968, it marked the end of an era in British crime. The trial was a media sensation, drawing intense public attention and exposing the true extent of the Krays' violence. Witnesses who had once been silent out of fear now came forward to testify against them. For the first time in years, Londoners saw that the so-called untouchable twins could in fact be brought to justice. Their conviction on multiple counts of murder and violence shattered the myth of their invincibility and showed that not even the most feared gangsters could outrun the law forever. The legacy of the Kray twins continues to haunt London. To some, they are remembered as brutal killers who ruled through fear and left a trail of victims in their wake. To others, especially in the East End, they remain figures of a strange kind of respect. Men who never forgot their roots and who stood against authority in a rigid, class-divided society. Countless books, documentaries, and films have been made about them, ensuring that their names are never forgotten. The Krays blurred the line between crime and celebrity, making themselves legends in their own lifetimes. But their story is ultimately one of downfall. The same fear and violence that built their empire also destroyed it. Their charm and public image couldn't protect them forever. In the end, the Krays serve as a chilling reminder that power built on intimidation and blood cannot last. Their rise and fall illustrate the dangerous allure of gangster glamour, the sharp suits, the clubs, the fame, masking the brutality beneath.